And next we have Cannibal, Demon of the Mind, a post-apocalyptic survival lit RPG series written by Ivan Shaman. There we go. It is 388 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. An act of terror eliminated civilization. 90% of all adults died, and 9% became zombies, whose brains were slowly recovered by nanites. Only 1% stayed human. Life had been turned into something resembling a computer game where levels were increased by absorbing the nanobots from other bodies. Presumptuous mankind had destroyed itself, but it might still be reborn in a new form, with a new meaning, with the soul sun, and with the new god of the supreme mind. Warning, this fiction contains gore. Okay, well, that's the novel description. I think this novel kind of does a disservice to itself. It's a translated Russian LitRPG novel. But the novel description, I don't think does a really good job of grabbing your attention. The cover art certainly doesn't. I wouldn't have even noticed that this is supposed to be a zombie hand. Unless I'd already read the story. It just looks like a hand. And the like Mayan sun god token in the hand kind of made me think this was going to have something to do with Mayans and sun gods to a degree. Surprise, with the symbolism. And so the cover really doesn't grab you on, and the novel title for sure doesn't tell you much about the story. And it all kind of makes sense after you've already written the story. But the point of cover art is to get you to read it in the first place. So if it doesn't make sense until like after you've already started, there's kind of an issue there. And I think that might be one of the reasons why the novel isn't doing well, or isn't doing like terribly well. It's not doing bad or anything, but I think a lot of other people might actually like the story if they could get past those other points. There are also some translation errors and some translation issues in the novel. I don't think they're too terrible personally, but they are. Some of them do stand out. For example, some of the powers, LitRPG powers in the novel, aren't translated understandably. At least for me, the biggest one. And the one that repeats the most is probably the issue with the power called Jerk. It's not described well, I think, initially enough so that people understand, or at least I didn't. And so the main character uses it like a ton in the story. And it honestly took me like 30% of the novel to even kind of grasp what it was. It apparently is a kind of movement ability. But for most of the novel, it's just described as like the main character's like Jerk. And then he's doing different things afterwards, like fighting up another human or another character, or whatever the case is. And there's really no description of like what that power is necessarily. It's just like, oh, he calls it out to activate it, and then something happens. There's not like this description of like, oh, he's shifted suddenly 20 feet to the right. It's just like he's just somewhere else. And I think that's just a translation issue of that particular power description of what that word could have been, basically. But there are other examples throughout the novel. It's just this happens in language translations. It is what it is. But if it's going to bother you, it's going to bother you. Like I said, it wasn't too big of an issue outside of that one particular power for me. But even then, it didn't like ruin the story. It's just like, oh, something to like note in the review, basically. Other than that, the story I think is actually really good. It's pretty good. It won't be everyone's cup of tea. The novel is titled A Post-Apocalyptic Survival LitRPG Series, and I think that's kind of inaccurate. One, it's not really post-apocalyptic, it's like in the middle of the apocalypse. Two, it's not really survival-ish. There are some survival mechanics that are described in the story early on, but that's really not the emphasis on the story at all. Instead, I kind of personally describe it as a monster main character, techno-zombie RPG apocalypse story. And this is a tiny bit spoilery, but I think it's important to note just because I think it's a thing about the story that is going to be the hook, at least for me. The main character is the monster. It's not from the human point of view. The novel description kind of describes the situation that's happening in the story in the background, but it gives you no indication whatsoever that the point of view of the main character is the monster. It's the zombie. And I think that's the hook that's missing in the novel description. Even though it's kind of hinted at in the picture, on the cover art, it's not something you would ever like pick up just from that point of view, from that picture. The story is told from the point of view of one of the zombies during the zombie apocalypse, basically. The main character grows more powerful. He's able to increase his intelligence stat, and he slowly gains back more and more of his memories of what happened in the past. As of course, he's also gaining like these zombie powers. The story slowly reveals over the course of the novel a larger and larger picture of just what happened in the world, how it got to this apocalyptic state, what these zombies are about. But it starts off again with a very slow build-up. The story actually starts off with the main character kind of being more mindless, that like a general like mindless zombie. And then as he's applying his stat points to his intelligence, he gets smarter and he gets the ability to reason more and he gets the ability to be self-aware, and all those things unlock different aspects of the story. And the best thing for me at least was that this kind of slow mystery reveal about like, how did this apocalypse happen? Where did all these like powers come from? And like this explanation gradually grew as the story continues. And I think that for me was the best part, that kind of mystery element, like just describing what happened, because nothing for any of the characters is really unlocked as zombies anyways. Right away, nobody kind of has a full picture of it. And so as the main character again increases his intelligence stat, and increases different abilities and specs or whatever, he's also increasing his ability to understand it and realize, kind of figure out what's happening. And that's revealed to the reader at the same time. So I like that aspect probably the best out of everything. There's decent combat here. The RPG stuff is decent as well. It's well thought out. I like the powers. I like the nanobot aspect of like explaining the RPG mechanics. The main character again gets his nanites by absorbing them from defeated humans and another source, which I won't spoil. And it allows some of these like really kind of cool zombie specializations. That was nice. However, the fundamental RPG system isn't particularly complex, and that's probably not the reason you're going to read the story. And mid and late levels in the story, that RPG progression kind of becomes a little less important and prominent, and that's okay. The setup is done in the beginning, first like third of the story basically, and the story kind of becomes a little more prominent, like that background stuff and the developments and that plotline become a little more important mid and late story. Overall though, I had a good time with that. That's kind of what it came down for me. If you can get past the minor translation issues and you like a monster main character story, or you just like the idea of a techno zombie apocalypse told from the point of view of the zombies, I think you're going to like this story. I think it'll be good for you. However, if those things don't sound interesting to you, this might not be the book for you. I like this personally story. However, I don't know that I would be willing to pick up a second book in the series. I think a lot of the thing that I like, the mystery aspect of what happened with the world and everything, is explained in book one. And so there's less of a compelling reason for me to read book number 2. I'll probably still give it a shot just because it's part of the podcast thing I do. But I'm definitely less inclined to do so. But I did actually like book number 1 here. I enjoyed this story. For me, it gets a score of 7.2 out of 10. Cannibal, Demon of the Mind, a post-apocalyptic survival LitRPG series. I had a good time with it, with a score of 7.2 out of 10. There we go.